Well, George Bailey had just one goal in life, and that was to get out of Bedford Falls. His father wanted George to stay and was constantly telling him about his responsibility to his community. His father's business, the Bailey Building and Loan, was the only thing that kept the town from being owned by a greedy slumlord named Mr. Potter. But George had big plans for his life. And on the day he first planned to leave, his father suddenly died. Later came the great stock market crash of 1928. There was a run on the banks, and the greedy Mr. Potter saw an opportunity. He offered to buy the building and loan and credit all of the investors 50 cents on the dollar. What would you have done if you were in George Bailey's shoes? You're ready to leave town on your honeymoon with a big wad of cash in your pocket, money you've been saving for years on failed trip after failed trip? Or do you stay and save the business, or do you leave and fulfill your dream? And if you've seen the movie, and I hope you have, we all know what George decided to do. He gave up his dream. He used the money to save his father's business, a decision we learn later that saved his town and also saved George. Have you ever made a decision like this? Set aside hopes and dreams for someone or something else. If you are a parent, you certainly have at least once. And in the movie, George never accepts what he's done. He resents it. And I can relate to that feeling. Lingering resentment, wondering what could have been. George wanted to do something meaningful with his life, and he couldn't imagine that the way to do it was to stay home. I think Peter could relate to George Bailey. He knows what it's like to have life plans change. And we see that in his reaction in our gospel reading this morning. If you know the story, Peter's sudden turn in our reading is very surprising. In the section just before this, Peter confesses Jesus is the Christ. And now here he is, only 5 verses later, rebuking Jesus in front of disciples and a crowd. At this point, in Mark's gospel, you see the disciples still think they're going to sit on 12 thrones next to Jesus after they defeat the Romans. Peter's hopes and expectations have been shattered. And knowing the culture helps us understand this even better. The people in the Greek-speaking world dreamed of 2 things: honor and glory. That was like the Greek version of the American dream. These things allowed you to rise above your social status. They could help you become important. And their impact was felt everywhere where the Greek culture had touched, which was everywhere in the ancient world. And these weren't the core values of someone like Peter, but they were still present. Because we all want to beat our enemy at their own game. And what could be more glorious than defeating the Roman army, the greatest army in the world, with a ragtag group of soldiers? So put yourself in Peter's shoes. You hear your teacher say, the Son of Man must undergo great suffering, be rejected by the elders, priests, and the scribes, and be killed. How would you react? A disciple doesn't just pull aside their teacher and rebuke them for no reason. This is a big deal. The text doesn't tell us, but I imagine Peter said something like, "Have you lost your mind, Jesus? Your destiny, and therefore my destiny, is honor and glory, to defeat the Romans, not suffering and death. This is the way to shame. It's not the way to restore the kingdom of David. Future kings do not talk like this. I've often heard preachers say the reason Peter rebuked Jesus is because he was afraid of suffering. And I think that that's not true. Peter was not afraid to die. People die in battles. And battles are what Peter was expecting. They knew Jesus wasn't holding himself out to be a great general, but it sounds like he's just going to accept defeat and death. And defeat is not an option for the Messiah. Like George Bailey, like many of us, it came down to one thing. Peter didn't want to lose. Do we have any competitive people in this room? Charlie Brown once said, "Winning isn't everything, but losing ain't anything." And I'm not very competitive. To my wife's everlasting chagrin, I don't mind losing at sports or in a game. But I certainly don't want to lose at life. None of us do. And Peter is just a fisherman. He's not a Roman citizen. He's not wealthy. His life and the lives of his people, the future of his children, all of it is out of his control. His profession is controlled and taxed by a Roman bureaucracy. The truth is, he will never do much better than he is doing right now. His culture tells him his only hope is to have a son to carry on his family name. And then suddenly, he's with the Messiah. And not just with the Messiah, but the Messiah's right-hand man. Suddenly, he can make a difference. He has a chance to do something, to be someone important, or at least to die for something worthwhile. And now Jesus is telling him he just doesn't get it. He's misguided. The importance or honor or stature or fame you are seeking, Peter, is not the way to life. Jesus is telling us this morning that life and happiness doesn't work the way we think it does. And there are two reasons why Jesus in the text tells us this is true. And the first one is this. You can't start living a new life until you let go of the old one. For those who want to save their lives will lose it, he said. We did not create ourselves. We didn't earn life somehow. Life is not our personal possession. The message of our faith is the opposite. The message of our faith is that life is a gift from God. And after we learn to let go of possessing ourselves and our life, when we learn to see life as a gift, we learn how to surrender other things as well. Alice McKenzie writes, maybe in surrender, you lose insecurity and find genuine appreciation for others. Maybe in surrender, you lose the habit of constantly comparing yourself to others and figure out you have value. Maybe in surrender, you lose your fear of others, people who are different from you, and find a new and renewed passion for life. Maybe you lose your addiction and find joy in the freedom it brings to you and your friends and your family. Maybe you lose your anxiety about what the future will bring and you find faith. You lose your guilt over the past and find hope for the future. You cannot find new life until you let go of the old. Second, it doesn't matter who you are, you cannot always win. What will it profit you if you gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? You will get sick. You will make a mistake. You will hit low spots and trials. Someone you love will get sick. You will endure suffering. And the only way to get through those times is with community. The only way to get through times like that is with emotional and spiritual depth. And you will find none of those things if you are only looking for yourself and your own interests. There are some things you won't be able to find your way through if you don't learn and listen to the wisdom of others. And if you always know what's best, how can you do that? Even if somehow magically you could always win. You're one of those people for whom everything always goes right. Don't you hate those people? The things that we chase after can't last. Money, glory, fame will not comfort you or help you find meaning in evil times. But love, self-sacrifice, humility, and wisdom can. We remember Peter 2,000 years later, and it's not because he won any great battles. In fact, the opposite. When George Bailey hit his lowest point, he was tempted to sell out to Mr. Potter. The quickest route, the easiest path, is always tempted. Souls can be pretty cheap. 50 cents on the dollar is pretty cheap. But thankfully, George had made the right choice. In fact, he had made the right choice in small choices, thousands of times. He had shown responsibility to his community. He had worked tirelessly to build his community and make it a better place. And on the day he planned to leave for his honeymoon, he sacrificed everything to save his town. So now, at the end of the movie, when he loses his strength to find the way, his community saves him. He gave up his life and they helped him find it again. Jesus is telling us this is the way life works. This is the way to happiness and peace. This is the way to life. So may we build community for others. May we seek the lost, the last, and the least in our community. May we set our minds, as Jesus calls us to, on divine things.